Ku Klux Klan was just a group of white people that wore masks and their white robes, and they carried a Bible with them, just like, but they would harass you.
I seen them at night when they would come down, just like when some of the black people belonged to NACP, they would get them and try to kill them.
A lot of them, I found out after they got the masks off, downtown shopping and in grocery stores and all that kind of stuff, they were some of them same people. Same people had them masks on. They'd be downtown selling your stuff, on the stores and all that kind of stuff.
Everyone, it seems, was in on the system designed to keep the status quo. Bed warmers were one thing, but falling in love with a slave woman was not even close to being acceptable. Which is why the love affair between Millie's great-great-grandmother Emily and her white half-brother William was never made official, even though their relationship carried on to his death long after his white wife, Martha, divorced him. And Millie's research turned up the documents that proved it.
Well, there were census records, there were deeds records, because African Americans up until the early 1900s didn't have records of their own. All of it had to be part of the master's records, the plantation records.
Since slavery was abolished in the middle of Emily's childbearing years, Millie hoped the births of her 8 babies would be recorded. But the genealogist she hired found much more.
I had just paid him to find the documents because I remember calling him after I talked to my mother, and I said, my God, I want to match this. I said, I should be able to find 8 children born by my great-great-grandmother by the Hoover master. I should be able to find that. Mm-hmm. And I said, and 1 child named Ivy Hoover. That should be able to be in the records somewhere. Right. He said that he was so inquisitive about that story that J. Edgar Hoover was my grandfather's second cousin. He wanted to find, and he went on his own before I paid him for 5 hours in the archives and found Emily Allen, Mother Elizabeth Allen. Emily Allen married, it says married in the census, to William Hoover and had all these babies and 1 named Ivy.
That was the smoking gun as far as Millie was concerned. It proved her great-great-grandmother, who never married yet had 8 babies, was more than just a bed warmer to William Hoover. She was family.
And there she was in that house, but she was owned by them. And she was in her own area. But somehow the record stated that she was married because all these babies were Hoover babies.
I often wondered why my grandfather was Allen and Uncle Ivy was Hoover. I asked about that.
It was fascinating to me at one point and then sad. I felt sad because it caused my mother to be my cousin.
And of Emily's 8 children, Ivy was the only one given the Hoover surname. But it wasn't until Millie went to Mississippi that she would discover a possible reason why.
Lord have mercy.
There he is. Ivory Hoover, husband of Ari Hoover.
You can see it right there. Ivy, and he spells it I-V-E-R-Y. That's what we thought. Ivy, H-O-O-V-E-R, Hoover. Husband, Ari, A-R-Y. See, that's what she's spelling it. Ari Hoover. What's that?
November 24th, 1859.
Oh, he almost on my birthday.
At the gravesite, Millie noticed Ivory Hoover was born on November 24th, 1859, only one day before her own birthday of November 25th, 1947. And she noticed something else.
Now, check this out. Ivy Hoover was born November 24th, 1859. Christian Hoover laying here was born November 24th.
Well, he's the grandfather.
I know, I'm just showing you the date, his birthday.
Right.
They was born on the same birthday. That's what I'm saying.
That's interesting.
That's what I'm saying. Look at that.
Born...
Can you believe that? Now wait, check this out. I was born November 25th.
Turns out Ivory Hoover, the first baby born to Christian Sr.'s daughter/granddaughter Emily, was born on the old slave master's birthday, fathered by his own son, Christian Kit Hoover.
But what's interesting here, Ivy was born in 1859 and would have been 9 years old when Christian died. So he would have known little Ivy, who was
Of course.
very fair-skinned, almost
Of
past his
course.
white, with blue eyes. He would have known this grandchild.
That's right.
And when little light-skinned Ivory was born, he had family ties to his grandfather in more ways than just being born on the same birthday. He was Christian Sr.'s grandson through both parents because Emily and her half-brother Christian Kit were both children of the slave master, making him Ivy's maternal as well as paternal grandfather. And since Emily was born a daughter and granddaughter to Christian Hoover, Ivy was a grandson/great-grandson through her. And after only a few decades with different surnames and ever-widening differences in skin color, Emily's descendants didn't even recognize that they'd come from the same family, which is why Millie was shocked to receive an email from a long-lost white relative named Christy Hoover Sullivan. The email began,
To Millie L. McGee, if your research is accurate, then we're cousins.
Christy's family had been doing their own genealogical research on J. Edgar Hoover because he claimed her great-great-great-grandmother Elizabeth A. Hoover as his grandmother. And Christy's family always attached a disclaimer, we claim no relation to J. Edgar Hoover because they were ashamed and embarrassed at his bigotry and abuse of power. Yet they were curious because as children, whenever they asked about J. Edgar, their aunt, just like Millie's grandfather, would only say,
Don't dig too deeply, or you'll uncover the skeletons in our family closet.
Nevertheless, Christy and her family searched for information on Elizabeth A. Hoover, their supposedly shared relative with J. Edgar Hoover. And surprisingly, they couldn't find any records to document her. Of course, had she been born a slave, this would have made sense, since slave births were not recorded. And it wasn't until Christy read Millie's book that she started to understand the missing links in her family's lineage. And when it came to Emily's firstborn, Ivory, there was a huge mystery surrounding what happened to him. For he showed up in the 1900 census married to a wife named Airy in Macomb, Mississippi. But by the 1910 census, he showed up listed as married to a woman named Annie. After that, he just disappeared. There were no articles in the papers, no death records, no obits, no divorce records, no indication at all of what had happened to him, only that his wife, Airy, had married someone new in 1918. It wasn't until Millie went digging in a secluded graveyard on the old Hoover plantation that she would solve the mystery.
Oh
my God! This is awesome.
So anyway,
Now we know. Died November. Is that November? Wow. November what? 1917. And I found him all the way up to 1910. We looked everywhere. Everywhere. Could not find what happened to him, where he went. And I thought he went to New Orleans. That's interesting.
Ivory Hoover died on November 18, 1917, only a week shy of his 42nd birthday, and only a few weeks after J. Edgar Hoover got his first Justice Department promotion. This was the same year Hoover's official father, Dickerson Hoover, had to resign his government job due to a nervous breakdown. It wasn't his first mental collapse. He'd been in and out of institutions since 1913, when J. Edgar Hoover had come of age at 18. And suspiciously, there were no records on file documenting Ivy's death, due to two subsequent courthouse fires, conspicuously convenient to the time of J. Edgar Hoover's rise to power.
in the early 20s was the initial fire, and then was later fully destroyed in the 1930s. And from what I understand from various accounts, the fire was quite mysterious.
According to the oral history, Ivy Hoover was J. Edgar Hoover's biological father through an affair he had had with Annie Hoover, who was married at the time to Dickerson Naylor Hoover in Washington, D.C. For when Ivy Hoover's son, J. Edgar Hoover, rose to the Ivy Leagues of power and looked down from his ivory tower, he couldn't have been very happy, because not only was he painfully aware that he'd be killed if anyone found out his secret, his own father had to die so that he could stay there. For Ivy's demise was the first of those two murders in Millie's family committed to keep Hoover's secrets safe.
And you know, when we came to Mississippi to look for this, I was more inquisitive. I really wanted to know then who was murdered, why they was murdered, so I knew I had to go to Mississippi.
Millie first discovered that Ivy had died young at his grave